On December 7, 1941, the world exploded in a firestorm of destruction. Bombs rained from the sky as Japanese fighters swooped low over Pearl Harbor, strafing ships and sowing chaos. The deck of the mighty USS Pennsylvania quivered with each deafening blast. In Dry Dock No. 1, Pennsylvania was spared the torpedoes that took apart her sister battleships, at anchor on Battleship Row. But there was no escape from the hellish inferno consuming the harbor. Acrid black smoke choked the lungs as fires raged unchecked. The destroyers Cassin and Downs, ahead of Pennsylvania in the dock, erupted into flames as Japanese bombs found their mark. A 1,000-pound torpedo tube from the disintegrating Downs flew through the air and crashed down on Pennsylvania's forecastle as men were thrown off the deck. Even though she was partly disabled at the lift dock, Pennsylvania's sailors had no intention of staying idle. They rushed to battle stations and manned the anti-aircraft guns, filling the sky with tracer fire in a desperate attempt to fight back against the swarms of Japanese attackers. 15 Pennsylvania crewmen perished that day, while another 38 were wounded. But through courage and sheer grit, damage control teams contained the destruction. Though battered, Pennsylvania endured. All around, the carnage was unimaginable. The guts of the American Pacific Fleet lay ripped open and bleeding. Battleships Oklahoma and West Virginia capsized. Arizona exploded in a volcanic eruption and sank to the bottom, taking 1,177 sailors with her to a watery grave. Over 2,400 Americans were lost or wounded on this date, which will live in infamy. But as the nation reeled on its knees, the Pennsylvania and her crew stood unbowed, a defiant fist raised against the onslaught. One of the only large warships to emerge under her own power, the resilient battleship would set forth to avenge her fallen comrades and exact retribution from the Japanese aggressors. Through fire and fury, Pennsylvania's guns would thunder for vengeance across the vast Pacific. The Pennsylvania-class battleships were conceived as the ultimate evolution of U.S. dreadnought design. Laid down in 1913, USS Pennsylvania and her sister ship, USS Arizona, were the newest, most powerful American battleships afloat at over 600 feet and 31,000 tons. They were fearsome engines of war, bristling with 4 triple turrets of 14-inch guns and a secondary battery of 22 5-inch guns. Even these technological marvels were not immune to the carnage at Pearl Harbor. While Pennsylvania was spared the worst of the onslaught, ensconced in dry dock, Arizona took a bomb down her stack that detonated her forward magazine, annihilating her in a massive explosion that took the lives of 1,177 members of her crew in an instant. Other battleships met similarly grim fates. The Oklahoma and West Virginia capsized. California and Nevada were sunk in the harbor mud. Yet the Pennsy endured. Though fires raged on her stern, started by the flaming destroyers Downs and Cassin, ahead of her in the dock, the battleship's damage was manageable. A 500-pound bomb struck amidships, exploding on the boat deck, taking 15 men, while flying debris from the destroyers took even more. But Pennsylvania's armored hull held firm against the onslaught, her watertight integrity uncompromised. As the flames subsided, the resilient battleship emerged from the carnage under her own power. While other warships lay crippled and broken, the Pennsy steamed for the mainland on December 20th for a refit at Hunters Point, California. Her battered hull would be mended, her fallen crewmen replaced by fresh-faced recruits eager to strike back at the Japanese foe. Pennsylvania's crew seethed with anger, their hearts hardened by the loss of comrades and burning for vengeance. In a mere 3 months, the mighty battle wagon completed her repairs and stood ready to carry the fight to the enemy. Her 14-inch rifles hungered to roar retribution. By April 1942, Pennsylvania returned to active duty, prepared to unleash her fury. Her first assignment was to patrol the U.S. West Coast against the threat of Japanese attack. But the ship and her men lusted for a more direct confrontation. They would not wait long. The tide of the Pacific War was shifting, and soon Pennsylvania would surge to the forefront, leading the charge to avenge Pearl Harbor and reclaim conquered American territory. Her guns were primed, her war flags ready to be unfurled. The big battleship, the resilient survivor of Japan's vilest sneak attack, stood poised to exact America's wrath and extract her pound of flesh from the Empire of Japan. For the men of USS Pennsylvania, the chance to finally confront the Japanese came in May 1943, in the remote, windswept Aleutian Islands. The enemy had audaciously seized the American islands of Attu and Kiska nearly a year prior, in a campaign designed to divert attention from their true objective, Midway. It was the first time since the War of 1812 that American soil had been occupied by a foreign power. Though the Japanese gambit failed and their forces were decimated at Midway, the troops stubbornly clung to the Aleutian footholds. This was an intolerable affront, a splinter in America's pride that had to be violently excised. For Pennsylvania and her crew, it was time to even the score. On May 11th, Pennsylvania unleashed her fury on Attu, her 14-inch guns erupting in a relentless barrage. The ship's mighty salvos tore through the shroud of fog enveloping the island, smashing Japanese positions and shattering morale. The enemy had nowhere to hide from the big gun's wrath. One of Pennsylvania's shells scored a direct hit on an ammunition dump, erasing it in a massive fireball visible for miles. Each thunderous broadside brought the Marines storming ashore one step closer to victory, against a fanatical foe determined to fight to the last man. The Japanese launched desperate raids to dislodge the American warship, even sending a submarine to dispatch the vessel that was the bane of their existence on Attu. Pennsylvania's vigilant escort ships depth-charged the attacker to oblivion, protecting their charge as she rained destruction on the defiant invaders. After 2 grueling weeks of brutal skirmishes, characterized by banzai charges and rampant self-inflicted Japanese casualties, Attu was again in American hands. Pennsylvania's guns had spoken, and the debt of Pearl Harbor was further repaid in blood and fire. Yet there was no respite for the American sailors. In November, Pennsylvania steamed to the Gilbert Islands as the flagship of Rear Admiral Richmond Turner's invasion fleet, targeting Macon Atoll. Once more, her 14-inch rifles pounded the enemy without mercy, uprooting determined Japanese defenders from their dugouts and pillboxes. Pennsylvania was their constant guardian as the Marines clawed their way ashore in a tooth-and-nail struggle through Macon's tangled jungles. With her guns on call, the ship's crew provided life-saving fire support, extinguishing Japanese positions and breaking the back of several vicious counterattacks. After 4 days of unrelenting combat, Macon was declared secure. As 1944 dawned, USS Pennsylvania found herself at the vanguard of the United States' ambitious island-hopping campaign across the Central Pacific. From the Marshalls to the Marianas and Palau, Pennsylvania's overwhelming firepower played a vital role in neutralizing heavily fortified Japanese island strongholds, unleashing a storm of steel upon the enemy's coastal defenses ahead of American amphibious landings. At Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands, Pennsylvania pulverized enemy fortifications, expending 656 rounds of 14-inch shells and 2,383 rounds of 5-inch ammunition over 2 days of continuous bombardment. The ship's gunners worked tirelessly, knowing that every shell that found its mark brought the Marines storming ashore one step closer to victory. Failure to silence the Japanese guns could result in catastrophic losses among the landing forces. Months later, during the invasion of Saipan, Pennsylvania's guns spoke with even greater fury, hurling 3,950 rounds of 14-inch and 13,941 rounds of 5-inch shells at the island's formidable defenses over 19 relentless days. The ship's crew labored around the clock, fueled by adrenaline and determination, aware that the entire operation's success hinged on their ability to neutralize Saipan's gun emplacements, supply dumps, and troop concentrations. Every shell fired was a blow struck against the empire that had attacked their homeland, and Pennsylvania's men were determined to make each one count. At Peleliu in September, Pennsylvania's guns roared with such intensity that the shockwave shattered the ship's own bridge windows in a freak event that shocked the ship's officers and served as a potent reminder of the devastating power she wielded against the deeply entrenched Japanese defenders. For 5 days, the ship's crew endured the bone-jarring concussions and searing heat of the guns, pouring over 1,300 rounds of 14-inch shells and nearly 5,000 rounds of 5-inch ammunition into the enemy's positions. They knew that the Marines counting on their support would face hell on earth when they landed, and Pennsylvania's gunners were determined to make the enemy pay dearly for every inch of ground. As the war entered its final stages, Pennsylvania faced the ever-present threat of Japanese naval counterattacks during the Battle of Leyte Gulf and the landings at Ormoc Bay, Mindoro, and Lingayen Gulf in the Philippines. With each operation, the ship's crew remained vigilant, knowing that the enemy's fleet lurked just over the horizon, eager to pounce on any opening to disrupt the American advance. Though Pennsylvania struggled to engage the Japanese in the close confines of Surigao Strait, her presence alone served as a formidable deterrent, a steel sentinel standing firmly between the enemy and the vulnerable transport ships ferrying troops to the beaches. Throughout the island-hopping campaign, the USS Pennsylvania and her indomitable crew had proven themselves an indispensable asset, their guns speaking with the voice of American resolve and righteous anger. As the war entered its final bloody act in the summer of 1945, the USS Pennsylvania found herself once again in the thick of the action, her guns thundering in support of the hard-fought campaign to wrest Okinawa from Japanese control. The island was to serve as the staging ground for the planned invasion of the Japanese homeland, and Pennsylvania's crew was grimly aware that the enemy would defend it with fanatical determination. On August 12th, as Pennsylvania lay at anchor at Buckner Bay, a lone Japanese torpedo plane slipped through the Allied defenses and launched its explosive payload at the battle wagon. The torpedo struck the ship's stern, tearing a gaping 30-foot hole and threatening to send her to the bottom. At that moment, Pennsylvania's luck, which had held through the dark days of Pearl Harbor and the brutal island-hopping campaign, seemed finally to have run out. But the men of Pennsylvania were a breed apart, tempered by the unyielding determination to see their ship and their nation through to victory. Even as the ship listed heavily, her stern settling lower in the water, damage control teams raced against time to contain the flooding. Working in chest-deep water, they shored up bulkheads and jury-rigged pumps, refusing to abandon their posts even as the ocean threatened to claim them. Through sheer grit and ingenuity, Pennsylvania's crew managed to keep her afloat, nursing the crippled ship first to Guam for emergency repairs and then back to the United States. It was a brilliant demonstration of their skill and resilience that Pennsylvania, the last major American warship damaged in the war, had not succumbed to her wounds, but instead endured to witness the final surrender of Japan. However, fate had one last bittersweet chapter in store for the proud vessel. In the summer of 1946, almost 1 year after the end of the war, Pennsylvania was selected to serve as a target ship for the atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll, a fitting end for a ship that had borne witness to the dawn of the Atomic Age. Stripped of her armaments and much of her crew, the battleship was towed to the test site, a ghost of her former self. On July 1st, the first atomic bomb, codenamed Able, detonated above the assembled fleet, subjecting Pennsylvania to a searing blast of heat and radiation. Incredibly, the ship survived, a testament to the strength and resilience of her design. But the second test, Baker, an underwater detonation, proved more damaging, flooding the ship with radioactive seawater and leaving her a contaminated hulk. For 2 years, Pennsylvania lingered at Kwajalein Atoll, a resting reminder of the awesome destructive power of the atomic bomb. Finally, on February 10, 1948, the decision was made to scuttle the once mighty warship, ending her long and storied career beneath the waves she had so long ruled. As Pennsylvania slipped beneath the surface for the final time, her legacy lived on in the hearts and minds of those who had served aboard her. From the infamy of Pearl Harbor to the hard-fought victories of the Pacific Campaign, the ship and her crew played a vital role in turning the tide of the war and securing the triumph of the Allies in the Pacific.